I used to believe my marriage was enough to carry me through life. My husband, Arif, was steady, hardworking, and dependable, the kind of man everyone said was a blessing. And for years, I convinced myself they were right. He provided comfort, security, and stability, yet somewhere along the way, affection slipped through the cracks. Our conversations turned into schedules, our laughter faded into silence, and our days were filled with the hum of routine. At first, I ignored the emptiness, thinking it was only a passing phase. Every marriage, I told myself, faced its dull seasons. But as weeks stretched into months, I began to feel invisible in my own home. Arif was always present in body but absent in spirit, his mind consumed by deadlines, figures, and the endless pressure of work. His love was still there, perhaps hidden behind exhaustion, but it no longer reached me. During those restless evenings, I often found comfort in my closest friend, Samina. She and I had been inseparable since college, and even after marriage, our bond only deepened. We shared secrets, laughter, and long conversations about everything from recipes to regrets. If anyone knew me better than myself, it was her. Samina's home often became my escape, a place alive with warmth and chatter. She had a husband, Imran, who was everything Arif wasn't. Where my husband was reserved, Imran was lively. Where Arif was practical, Imran was charming. He had an ease about him, a way of making people feel seen, as though every word spoken to him carried weight. I never paid much attention at first. To me, he was simply Samina's husband, nothing more, nothing less. But over time, small things began to stir inside me. It started with how attentively he listened when I spoke, nodding with genuine interest, even in trivial matters. Then came the compliments, subtle, almost innocent. "You've always had such a thoughtful way with words," he once said, smiling in a way that lingered too long in my mind. I brushed it off, telling myself I was overthinking. Yet the truth gnawed at me. In his presence, I felt alive again. The void my marriage had carved seemed to shrink, if only for a moment, whenever he was around. The conflict within me grew quietly, hidden behind polite smiles and casual conversations. I loved my friend dearly, and betraying her was unthinkable. Still, the heart doesn't always follow rules. I caught myself waiting for the moments when he would join our talks, secretly enjoying his laughter, the sparkle in his eyes, the way he carried himself with effortless charm. It was dangerous, of that I was certain. But temptation never announces itself with thunder. It arrives softly, like a whisper in the dark. And though I refused to admit it, then a storm was gathering inside me. What I didn't know was that one night would come when that storm would no longer stay hidden. It happened on a night that seemed harmless, the kind of evening friends often shared without a second thought. Samina had invited us for dinner, and her house was glowing with warmth. The aroma of spices filled the air, laughter bounced off the walls, and for a while I forgot the emptiness I carried. Arif joined us, as he always did, but even in the midst of conversation, his eyes remained glued to his phone. Work consumed him, pulling him further from the table, further from me. Imran, on the other hand, carried the room with ease. He moved effortlessly between stories and jokes, drawing smiles from everyone. I tried to ignore how easily my attention clung to him, but the truth was undeniable. I was drawn to his light, the very light I once wished to see in my husband. Dinner ended, and soon Arif excused himself, citing yet another urgent call from the office. "I'll head back home," he said quickly, barely meeting my eyes. I nodded, too familiar with the routine to protest. A part of me felt abandoned, though I buried the thought before it could show. As the night stretched on, Samina grew tired. She excused herself with a soft smile, trusting that her husband would handle the remaining dishes. "You two talk. I'll rest for a bit," she said, yawning. I watched her disappear down the hallway, leaving behind a silence that felt heavier than it should have. Imran and I sat in the living room, the glow of the lamp painting the room in soft shadows. At first, our talk was innocent, about books, about travel, about dreams never pursued. Yet each word carried a weight, pulling us closer. I found myself leaning in, listening with more attention than I should have, hanging on to every syllable as though it were something precious. He asked me questions no one had asked in years. "Do you ever feel unseen?" he said, his eyes steady on mine. My heart tightened. I wanted to deny it, but honesty slipped out before reason could stop it. "Every day," I whispered. The room grew smaller, the silence between sentences louder. His gaze lingered, not in arrogance but in understanding. It was as if he could see the cracks in me that I had tried so hard to hide. And in that moment, I forgot everything else: Samina's trust, Arif's loyalty, even my own conscience. A single choice can change everything. It doesn't always come with grand gestures or dramatic words. Sometimes it arrives quietly disguised as comfort. That night, I let my loneliness guide me into his arms, crossing a line I could never uncross. When it was over, the weight of what I had done pressed down on me like stone. The air between us was heavy, filled with a silence neither of us dared to break. I should have felt alive, but instead, a cold unease crept into my chest. I didn't know it yet, but that one night would become a secret that would haunt me more than the emptiness ever had. The next morning, sunlight spilled across the room as if determined to expose every shadow I wished to keep hidden. I avoided Samina's eyes as she handed me tea, her voice as warm and trusting as ever. Each word from her lips felt like a blade against my conscience. She laughed about something trivial, completely unaware of the storm inside me. I forced a smile, but behind it was a weight I could barely carry. Arif noticed my silence when I returned home. He asked gently if I was tired, but I couldn't bring myself to answer honestly. How could I explain the distance growing between us when it was of my own making? Instead, I muttered excuses: headaches, sleeplessness, stress. He accepted them, though I saw the doubt flicker in his eyes. The guilt of deceiving him gnawed at me, yet the truth remained locked inside, suffocating me from within. Imran grew distant too. The easy charm he once carried around me had dimmed. Where there had been warmth, there was now awkward silence. We both knew the line we had crossed, and though neither of us spoke of it, the memory lingered like a shadow in every glance. We avoided being alone, avoided words that might reveal too much, but silence was its own confession. My paranoia sharpened with each passing day. When Samina called, I felt my hands tremble, as though she somehow knew. When she laughed freely with me, I wanted to weep at her innocence. Her trust was unwavering, and that only deepened my shame. The betrayal wasn't only against my husband, but against her, the friend who had stood by me in every season of life. Nights became unbearable. I lay beside Arif, listening to his steady breathing, and wondered if he would ever forgive me if the truth surfaced. Sometimes he reached for me, but I turned away, claiming exhaustion. I knew he felt the distance, yet he never pressed. That quiet patience, once a comfort, became unbearable. It reminded me of all I stood to lose. The conflict inside me grew louder than any spoken word. Was one fleeting night worth the destruction of 2 marriages, worth shattering a friendship that had lasted years? I told myself it was a mistake, a single lapse of judgment. But mistakes have a way of living longer than we expect. I began to notice every detail more sharply: Imran's careful avoidance of my gaze, Arif's suspicious silences, Samina's tender words. Each one was a reminder that the truth could surface at any moment. I lived in fear of a crack in my facade, a slip of the tongue, a glance too long. And yet, part of me longed to confess, to release the weight pressing down on me. But confession would not heal, it would only destroy. So I carried the burden in silence, knowing the storm was far from over. What I didn't realize was that silence has its own way of betraying us, and soon the walls I had built would begin to crumble. The days that followed felt like walking on broken glass. Every step I took, every word I spoke, risked cutting open the truth I fought to bury. Arif grew more observant, though he said little. His silence carried a weight heavier than accusation, and I found myself shrinking under his gaze. He hadn't asked directly, but I sensed he knew something was wrong. The distance between us was no longer invisible. It was a wall neither of us dared to name. One evening, he finally confronted me. His voice was calm, but his eyes searched mine with a kind of desperation. "You're not here anymore," he said quietly. "Even when you're beside me, you're far away. Tell me, what have I done to lose you?" The question tore at me. I wanted to scream the truth, to fall into his arms and beg for forgiveness. But the words remained trapped, tangled in fear and shame. Instead, I lowered my eyes and muttered, "It's not you. I don't know what's happening to me." It was a half-truth, and he accepted it with a pained nod, though I knew he didn't believe me entirely. Imran, too, sought closure. One afternoon, when Samina was out shopping, he approached me with an expression I had never seen before, one filled not with charm but with regret. "We can't let this happen again," he said firmly, his tone stripped of warmth. "That night was a mistake, and it will ruin everything if we let it linger. For their sake, for ours, we must forget." His words stung, not because they were harsh, but because they were true. That night had been born of weakness, not love. I nodded, unable to argue. "It's over," I whispered, though the guilt remained etched in my soul. Meanwhile, Samina remained blissfully unaware. She continued to lean on me, sharing her joys, her worries, her dreams, never suspecting the secret I carried like a hidden wound. Her trust was a mirror I could no longer look into without flinching. The betrayal was mine alone to bear, and the more she confided in me, the more it hollowed me out. In the quiet of my nights, I reflected on the choices that had led me here. I had sought comfort outside my marriage, thinking it would fill the emptiness inside me. But instead of relief, I found only chains of guilt and fear. Betrayal had not healed me, it had broken me further. I began to see that love, no matter how strained, requires honesty to survive. And friendship, no matter how strong, crumbles under deceit. I hadn't just betrayed my husband or my friend, I had betrayed myself, compromising the very values I once held sacred. As time passed, I resolved to live differently, not by confessing what could never be undone, but by carrying the lesson like a scar that would forever remind me of my weakness. One night of desire had shown me the true cost of disloyalty. It was not passion, not fulfillment, but a haunting silence that lingered long after. And so I chose to walk forward, not as the woman I had been, but as someone who knew that even a single choice can alter the course of a lifetime. The storm had passed, but the ruins it left behind would always remain.